Hey guys, this is Ryan from rm-sounds.com, and today I would like to do a quick little demo of a new plugin I've developed for Max4Live, and it is called a random note on CC generator. And what it does is basically it takes in a MIDI input from your keyboard or a sequence in Ableton, and every time it hears a MIDI note on message, it generates a random floating point number between 0 and 1. Which can then be sent out to any destination of your choice in Ableton. Basically anything that can be automated can be a potential destination, and so that can be built-in effects or instruments or third-party effects and instruments, whatever you want. The concept behind this plugin comes from the real world and the fact that in nature we never really hear the same sound twice. So you can imagine an acoustic guitar or something. You can play the same note over and over again, but every single time you pluck that string, it will sound slightly different. And this is due to an unlimited amount of factors. The way you pluck the string, how hard you pluck the string, the temperature in the room, the amount of pressure you're applying to the fretboard. We never hear the same thing twice, and this is a good thing, and it's musical, and we've kind of grown accustomed to it. But in electronic music, specifically digital music, everything literally is perfect, and it can sound very static, and our ears can get very bored of it very quickly. And that's why a lot of people in electronic music are going out and getting all these boutique analog synthesizers, because they are full of imperfections and everybody loves them. If you're smart though, you can actually program your computer or whatever, your digital system, to sound very analog, basically, by, programming these imperfections. Anything can be programmed. So that's what I was taking a shot at, and this is very much for myself, and I thought it would be cool to share it with the world as well. So if you would like to get your hands on this, you can get it from my website. Again, that's rm-sounds.com. And it goes by the title of RNOCC. So let's get into it. Basically what we've got here is, here's the Ableton interface, and you can see this bar here indicates the random numbers between 0 on the left hand side and 1 on the right hand side. This little triangle indicates the current random number that's been generated. And every single time you trigger a note on message, so for example, with the kick on this track here, if I turn the audio off but play it, every single time you see the kick has been triggered, it will move to a different position within the gray area that you've selected. And to do this, you can click and drag. And if I do it like that, then it will jump between the full 0 to 1 range. If I want to limit that range to, say, 50% to 100%, I simply click and drag like that. 25% to 50% like so. It will stay within the range that you indicate by clicking and dragging. To provide further control of your randomly generated numbers, I have these parameters here, and these apply to, they will vary depending on your destination. For example, I set it up from 0 to 1 because all of the third-party plugins in Ableton, Massive by Native Instruments or whatever insert VST here is, they all use a range from 0 to 1. And so that's why, by default it just works out of the box like that. The tricky part though is when you're using Ableton's built-in instruments, because every different parameter has a different range that it likes to work in. For example, if you're using the transposition on a simpler, you can see here it uses semitones, so you might want to work within a range of 0 to 12. Now to do this, you would actually just multiply the 0 to 1 range by 12. It's quite simple, and you can do that just like this. Another example could be the pan position. its you know, default state in the dead center is actually in the middle of its range, between +1 being all the way right and -1 being all the way to the left. So to set a range like that, you would simply multiply it by 2 and then offset by -1 to get -1 to +1. And then it would start jumping between all the way to the left and all the way right and everything in between. So that's what these two do. You also have a smooth parameter here, and that basically just interpolates between every value. So you can see right now it jumps every time it hears a MIDI note, but if I turn up the smooth parameter, it will begin to slide. And this is desirable sometimes, again depending on the destination, but other times you may not want this. It's just an option for you that's there. Now, what else do we have? Down here we have the destinations. You can have up to 4 destinations for each random note on generator. And you can also have as many instances as you want of this plugin. So if you want different destinations to have different randomly generated numbers, then you would want to use separate instances. But if you want the same numbers to trigger several destinations, you can set it up down here. And the way this is done is similar to the video theremin example in the Max4Live lessons package, where you set your device. Any device within the Ableton set shows up on the top row, and then you can select any parameter within that device in the bottom row. And below that you also have a simple power button, and by default it is turned off, and this is just a way for you to bypass your modulation. So like I said, it's turned off by default. You will have to turn it on when you're starting out. So yeah, that's how that works. I built a quick little set here. Sounds kind of goofy, but kind of shows a few different uses for this plugin. So let's just go through that. Just going to turn that off. So first thing here, I've got a plugin, Massive, on this MIDI track, and it's just playing simple 16th notes. You're not hearing any automation or anything. If I turn all of these off, you will hear a very static, boring sequence. Let me bring up my volume. Just like that. It's a basic FM patch using a sine oscillator, sine square oscillator, with the position, wavetable position turned up a slight amount right now. And we've got 3 instances of the RNOCC, and the first one is simply modulating the modulation oscillator phase amount, which is the equivalent of the FM amount. So if I turn that on, you can hear things instantly get a lot more interesting. Right. Secondly, I've got another RNOCC, and this one is modulating the modulation oscillator pitch. So again, the FM modulator pitch oscillator, basically. And this just makes it sound a little more whacked out. Third one is kind of modulating the decay envelope of the amplitude decay, or sorry, the decay of the amplitude envelope. And you can visualize this here if I trigger this now and turn that one on. You can see it's jumping around, and this is cool for ghost notes and stuff like that. So that's all we got going on for that one. The second MIDI track is just a kick drum that I threw in just for effect, and the kick drum is actually, every time we trigger a MIDI note for the kick drum, it's actually going to change the oscillator wavetable position of the massive track. So if I turn this on, if I turn them both on actually, and I go into massive again, every time that kick drum kicks, you can see the wavetable position knob is moving. If I make that more drastic, you can hear it's simply just transitioning between a sine wave and a square wave as the carrier oscillates in this example. Thirdly, we've got an analog synth. Ableton Analog is the title of it. And again, if I turn off all three of these, it is very static sounding on its own. Just a very basic 16th note sequence. And if I turn on the first RNOCC, what we've got going on here is in the second one, we are modulating the key tracking of the first oscillator. And so this will provide subtle detuning, weird detune variations, and gives it kind of a weird analog sound that I quite like, actually. So here we go. If I make that more drastic, you can hear it, but I don't want it like that. I just want it very, very little. And the second one is doing the exact same thing on the second oscillator. So you hear weird chorusing effects on each different note because there's a different distance between the oscillators for every 16th note. Again, if I make that more drastic, I don't want it drastic, I just want it to be subtle. Thirdly, I have done a very similar setup as to what I did with the massive track with the decay of the amplitude envelope, and this is just going to give us some more ghost notes. So if I turn that on, we get a nice, almost sounds like a chord arpeggiator sound. So that's kind of cool. So that's all we got going on there. On the fourth MIDI track, we have a simple hi-hat pattern, and if I turn all those off on that one, again, very boring. Just one 16th note, or a bunch of 16th notes triggering one sample, sorry. And what I've done here is I've actually set it up so that it's got several samples in it, as you can see here, and each sample gets its own zone in the chain selector, and this is unique to Ableton's samplers. And so every single time I hit a MIDI note, I'm going to move that chain selector randomly. And here's a good example of the multiply parameter. That the chain selector parameter takes in a range from 0 to 127, so I simply multiplied, and now if I turn that on, you can hear every single 16th note will trigger a different sample. And you can see up here, this yellow indicator shows us which sample is triggering currently. Secondly, I just have a pan, another example of multiply and offset. I'm multiplying it by 2, offsetting it by -1. If I turn that on, we're jumping around a little bit in the stereo field. And finally, again, I love the ghost note concept. We're doing another decay envelope random generator. So we get nice short ones and a couple long ones. Kind of simulates a closed open hi-hat setup. So yeah, that's just a few examples of what you can do with this. There are so many more. I only had time to show you a few, but I'm sure you'll come up with your own ideas.